Successful fishing, at least on a consistent basis, is all about probability, right? It's all about putting yourself in a position where you're likely to have success. Unfortunately, most anglers don't realize that. They really have no idea. They think successful fishing is about knowing good spots. It really isn't. It's about figuring out what fish are doing on a daily basis and capitalizing on those conditions to have success. The best fishing guides know this, and they know it well. Now trust me, they catch fish in a certain spot one day, they're probably heading back there first thing the next day. But it doesn't mean they're gonna catch fish there. Many times, that spot, the conditions will be different, the fish just won't be biting there. So they'll have to kind of figure out a plan for that day, given the conditions on that day. So what does that mean? How do you figure out where fish are gonna be on any particular day, given that day's conditions? It's actually not quite as hard as you think. You just gotta stay mobile. You've gotta have an open mind, and you've got to be willing to move a lot. So I'm gonna take you to an area that I've fished in, certainly a whole lot in my career, but it's not an area that I fish a lot on my own. It's kind of that quasi area between Lafitte and Port Sulphur. I just grabbed a section of map that shows some marsh features that we have here in Louisiana. You can actually do your homework at home before you go to an area and identify areas that are likely to hold speckled trout and redfish. Doesn't mean that they're going to. When you show up there, things may be very, very different than you expected, but at least you can be ahead of the game. You can have a list of spots and go hit those all in a day's fishing. So for this little exercise, we're just gonna go with the time frame that we're in now. Right now, it's late September. And there's a few things we know about speckled trout tendencies this time of year. The fish have spent all summer in the outside waters, the big bays, the Gulf of Mexico spawning, and now they're kind of starting to move in to take advantage of incredible shrimp stocks that we have here in South Louisiana. And looking at this map, a few things strike me as interesting. It looks like probably the satellite image was captured on a falling tide, or maybe just the beginning of a rising tide. If you notice, several of the bays have rich, kind of dark water, probably very, very clear water. But the bigger bays have a little bit more stained water. Either that's moving back into those areas, or the clean water is falling out toward those bigger bays. But that kind of tells me something. That tells me that those areas might have a lot of grass, also might have a lot of shells. So I'm a little bit ahead of the game before I even show up there, just identifying areas that should have some clean water. Now let's imagine I show up there, I get on the water, and that tide is actually rising. We're at the beginning of a rising tide. Not my favorite situation for the autumn of the year. I much prefer a falling tide this time of year, kind of the opposite of the spring. Spring, you really want a rising tide. In the autumn, you want a falling tide. But let's show you, we show up there, and the tide has just begun to rise. So we're going to be dealing with a rising tide for the rest of the day. What I'm going to start looking for are points that should be productive. Now, if you look at this point, it's got kind of a little island off the point. So I would probably focus on the primary point as well as the secondary point. Now, there are a lot of reasons why points are so productive, but certainly one of them is because current kind of gets funneled around a point. They're great ambush areas for fish to kind of hide behind, get in that slack water and just ambush bait as it's being pulled around the point with the current. Also, if you look at this map, these points just kind of constrict everything in this Lake 5 area. Those fish have to kind of, if they're migrating through there, they're going to be bracketed by the two sides of the shoreline to go around those points. So again, it looks like we've got clean water in here, and we've got these beautiful points in Lake 5. So that's probably going to be some of the areas that I'm going to start in. Okay, assuming our tide's rising, here's another spot that I'm going to check out. The reason why is, okay, you look at Upper Wilkinson Bay, more than likely there was some shrimp in there on the falling tide. They probably got sucked out into the major part of Wilkinson Bay, and many of those are going to migrate out offshore. But some of those shrimp are going to get stuck in Wilkinson Bay, and when that tide starts rising, they're going to migrate back. So that's a great ambush point right on that corner on a rising tide. I would definitely check that out. Okay, these 2 points would also be very, very high on my list on a rising tide, particularly for redfish. If you look at these points, they're very pointy. They're very pointy. They're not all that rounded. that's an indication that probably there's some shell there that's going to that has slowed the erosion of those points, and that's something I'm going to want to check out. I may determine when I get there, hey, that's not the case. There's not a lot of shell there, but it's definitely something I'm going to look at. And the reason I say more for redfish is because I'm just looking at that, and I'm not sure that the bay itself has enough depth to hold significant numbers of speckled trout. But again, I may get there and determine something different. But that's an area I'm going to look at. Okay, so it should go without saying, but at any of these spots, we need to fish with our eyes as much as with our rods and reels. When you get in there, hey, you may go to a certain point or something and the water's just filthy dirty. Don't waste time. Just move on out. Or you may go in an area and see bait nearby. Go fish the bait by all means. And don't stick in any one spot long, particularly if you're new to an area and you don't know the kind of the topography and how things are laid out. Don't stick around too long in any one particular area there. Man, the coast of Louisiana is loaded with hotspots. Go find where the fish are feeding. Hit spots and hit spots and hit spots. Eventually you'll find some fish feeding. Okay, so let's say we get in there and it's not a rising tide, it's a falling tide. Definitely a much better situation for this time of year. In this particular spot, of everywhere on the map, this particular spot looks to me like it would be most productive. There's lots and lots of marsh to the northeast, all kind of draining into this one bay. Speckled trout, I gotta imagine, are gonna stack up there, ambushing shrimp that are being pulled out of the marsh on that falling tide. Looks like a falling tide is gonna produce clean water in the area. Boy, I get in there and see a falling tide, that's probably one of the first places I'm gonna go. I'm gonna throw probably a soft plastic under a popping cork. I'm not a live shrimp fisherman. If you are, hey, throw live shrimp there. I'm going to fish under a popping cork, and I'm definitely going to fish with my eyes. I'm going to be looking for shrimp popping, maybe birds diving, anything I can find in that area that is an indication that fish are feeding right there. And I can tell you, I have never fished this particular spot. I'm not saying go there and fish it today. What I am saying is it just looks like it should be very, very productive. Okay, on a falling tide, this spot also looks intriguing to me. It's it's kind of on the edge of Mud Lake, which doesn't sound all that encouraging for finding clean water, but I'm sure it is clean there frequently, coming out of Lake 5 right there. But again, this is an area where it looks like it's a fairly major little pass right there that shrimp should be being pulled out of the backwaters into that area. I got a nice point right there. Again, an indication that perhaps we've got some shell. I'm going to definitely throw a popping cork, and maybe if I get in there and find that the water's a little bit deep, coming up to a rise that has some shell on it, I'll be fishing along the bottom there. Two more spots I'm also going to check, and both of these look promising as well. The first one, the upper one, the water coming out of Upper Wilkinson Bay has got to have some shrimp in it on a falling tide. Somewhere around in there, there's going to be speckled trout feeding. I gotta imagine. Might have to work a little bit to find them because it is kind of a broad area right there. But I'm gonna hunt there and try and find some type of drop off, some type of ledge, something that's going to hold some speckled trout, provide kind of an ambush point for them where the current changes, where they can ambush those shrimp. Also, the lower one, the one more to the right, you've got that major bayou coming down. You've also got that little cut between the island and the point. Again, just great ambush points looking there. Going to have to work a little bit to find exactly where the fish might be holding, but that's something I'm certainly going to check out. So just in general terms, map study is absolutely crucial. It's way too easy these days to do it, to just ignore it. You know, this map came from Bing.com, and they certainly have great maps on Google as well. Take advantage of it and do your homework before you ever leave the house. Even if you know your area very, very well, even if you are very familiar with your home fishing waters, man, you will find some stuff on maps that you really didn't even know were there, didn't fish, didn't think about it. Try and look at your area through new eyes as a new angler coming in, and I guarantee you'll increase your success. Something else, get a chip that will show you a satellite map on your GPS. Again, you will find things in your favorite area that you never knew were there. It will definitely make you a better fisherman. Please leave comments in the comment section below. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video and like to see more of these. And always check NOLA.com on YouTube and NOLA.com Outdoors on Facebook as well. We'll be in touch.